Welcome back to another history class. This week we will be talking about what were Mayan cities like. So this is section 3.2, okay? So please go get out your books and open up to pages 40 and 41. Get a notebook and yeah, we'll get started with the subject. Okay, so obviously, like the other classes, I'm just gonna read through the book and we're gonna keep stopping and kind of like summarize what we're reading, all right? So, everyone, I hope everyone has turned to page 40 and I will get reading. Okay, so what were the Mayan cities like? So, the Maya never had one emperor ruling over them or just one central capital city. Instead, there were many independent areas, each controlled by a different king. They were called city-states. The city-state was the total area ruled by a king. The king and his advisors and all the important buildings were located in the main city, usually close to the center of the city-state. So, how many city-states were there? What were Mayan cities like? And how were the cities set out? Okay, so our first question of the day is, did the Maya have one emperor or one central city? The answer to that is absolutely not. Okay? No, the Mayans did not have one emperor ruling over them and not just one central city. Instead, they had different city states, they had different areas. And there were many independent areas, and each area was ruled by a different king. It's not like there were all these areas and one king ruled over all of them. No. Each city-state, each independent area was ruled by a different king, okay? And just so you know, each area was called a city-state. So take your time to write this down. No, there were many independent areas and each controlled by a different king. Okay, let's move on. What were the important buildings, kings, and where were the important buildings, kings, and his advisors located? Okay, so as I said, each city-state had a different king, okay? And the king and his advisors and all the important buildings were located in the main city, okay? And the main city was usually close to the center of the city-state. So yes, they were all located in the main city, usually close to the center of the city-state. You need to know this. Okay. Next question is, did the Maya all speak the same language and what was it called? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, on page 40, let's go on to the next paragraph. Okay, so it's called Maya civilization. There were many different city-states, but all the Maya spoke the same language, and this language was called Mayan. At least 6 million people still speak Mayan today. People in all the city-states worshipped in the same way and followed similar laws. They planned their cities in the same way, with all the important buildings in the center and the ordinary homes and farms on the edges. All the Maya dressed in a similar way and shared the same calendar. Okay, so I think we got our question answered. All the Maya, all of them spoke the same language, and that language was called Mayan. Okay? It's not like each city-state had a different language. They all spoke the same language. Next question. Do people still speak Mayan? Yes, like the paragraph we just read said. At least 6 million people still speak Mayan today. So I personally would have thought that it was long gone. Do you know what I mean? But apparently not. Apparently people still speak Mayan today. That's like a little picture of a place in the Mayans. Okay, so let's move on to the next paragraph. By the way, I wanted to mention, not only did they share the same language, they also shared the same beliefs, the same laws, the same culture. They were all, even though each city state had like a different king ruling for them, they shared the same beliefs, the same laws. They were all very similar. All right? So let's move on to the paragraph on page 41. Okay? So on page 41, it says rival city states. Okay, so for many years, historians thought the Maya were peaceful. However, archaeologists discovered wall paintings, statues, and carvings that recorded wars between rival city-states. Sometimes one city-state became very powerful and gained control of some of the smaller city-states, but no state managed to control the whole Mayan civilization. Okay, so let's just talk about the laws at the moment. So describe the laws that the Mayans had. So, like I mentioned before, people in all city-states worshipped in the same way. So by worship, they mean they had the same beliefs. They all had the same God, okay? They also followed similar laws, okay? So obviously, to hold a city together, you have laws, People need to follow these laws in order to, keep your city under control. And they all shared similar laws, okay? They also they planned their cities in the same way with all the important buildings in the center. So all of them, each city, each of the cities, I'm going to talk more about this in a bit, like as you can see in your book on pages 40 and 41, there's a huge picture of like one of the cities. We're going to go over that as well. So they obviously plan their cities in the same way. So they put all the important buildings in the middle, in the center, and I guess the houses would, surround those important buildings. Also, the ordinary homes and farms were on the edges, okay? So they would be at the edges of the cities. All the Mayans would wear similar clothes, so they didn't have different outfits, kind of like how we have different outfits today. You don't see people wearing the same thing often, right? So they all wore similar clothes, and they all shared the same calendar, okay? So take some time to write this down. Okay. Were the Maya peaceful? Okay. Well, like we mentioned in the last paragraph, for many years, historians thought the Maya were peaceful. However, archaeologists discovered wall paintings, statues, and carvings that recorded wars between the rival city-states. So apparently, I feel like every civilization had problems. Do you know what I mean? I don't think they were always like happy, peaceful, bubbly. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, thanks to artifacts that have been left behind, the archaeologists were able to discover wall paintings, statues, and carvings that recorded wars between the rival city-states. And they tend to do that a lot, they would leave huge huge pieces of writings on their walls or on pieces of rock and just, talk about the reign of the kings and all that stuff, all right? So, yeah, that is how we know about that. They were not always peaceful. Okay, well, it says, did any of the states manage to control the whole Mayan civilization? No, none of the states managed to control the whole Mayan civilization. I feel like each city state was responsible for its own piece of land, and that's it. Nobody tried to reign over the other ones. I mean, there would be fights between them, but they were never successful. And yeah, so there's a little did you know on page 41. It says, did you know the Maya built their spectacular buildings without metal tools, the wheel, or large animals such as the donkey, ox, or elephant to help them? That's actually really interesting. And there's also this picture on the top right corner. Okay, so it says, oh my god, I hope I can pronounce this. Teotihuacan? Yeah, Teotihuacan was a city over 100,000 people. It was a center for trade, and by 500 CE, it was the sixth largest city in the world. The larger pyramid shown here is the third largest in the world. That's actually really cool. All right. Oh, and I just literally read that. Okay, so yeah, the Teotihuacan. I can't read it. They had like really long names as well. Teotihuacan was a city over 100,000 people and was a center for trade. And obviously, like I mentioned before, by 500 CE, it was known as the sixth largest city in the world. Okay, and the pyramid you see in the picture right there, that is known as the third largest pyramid in the world right now. Take a minute to write this down. Like I mentioned as well, so if I had to ask you what was the sixth largest city in the world, you would tell me Teotihuacan was the sixth largest city in the world. And that's just a picture of the pyramid, which is the third. So write this down as well. Okay, so I also read about this as well, but let's just go over it. The Maya built their spectacular buildings without metal tools, the wheel, or large animals such as donkey, ox, or elephant to help them. So they actually built their buildings themselves. They usually, in other civilizations or just today, we need a lot of assistance. We need a lot of help building things. But they were actually very independent. They didn't rely on things like that. So, yeah, that's really crazy. And like their buildings were very, very unique as well. Like, for example, look at the picture to your right. Like, they had very, very cool looking buildings. And as you can see, they usually built their buildings out of stone. Okay, so before I get into the vocabulary words of the chapter, I want you guys to look at the book. So on page 40 and 41, everybody should be opened up. Otherwise, this is going to be hard for you. Okay, so there's this huge picture of the city-state. Okay, and it's pointed out a lot of things. So you need to know that there were more than 60 separate city-states in the Mayan civilization. So more than 60. And some of the biggest, such as Tikal or the one we mentioned before, Teotihuacan, they were home to about 100,000 people or more. Okay? And in each of their cities, they would put all the main buildings, all the very important buildings in the center, in the middle. Okay? And let me just go from left to right. So, what they also, okay, so the Maya used an observatory to watch the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. This was important to the Maya. They used the positions of the stars and the planets to decide when to plant and harvest their crops and when to go to war with another city state. All right, so they had an observatory built in the middle of the city just to, keep track of the stars and the moon and the sun. And that helped them plan certain things like what to plant, what to harvest, or when to go to war. Very interesting. They also, so the farms were on the edge of the city. So both farms and houses were at the edge of the city, whereas the important buildings were in the middle. And the people who managed the city used these buildings. So the people who kind of were important and had very important job roles, they would use the buildings in the center of the city. Okay? And the pyramids, so I don't know, like I mentioned before, there were pyramids built in the cities as well, the city states. And the pyramids had great importance in Mayan culture and beliefs. The Maya used the pyramids as tombs for dead kings and as places for public ceremonies. So the purpose of the pyramid was to kind of use them as tombs for the dead kings and for public ceremonies like celebrations and stuff. So yeah, um, pyramids were a huge part of their culture. Also, they had a ball court. Okay, so ball games were very popular with the Maya. In the Mayan city of Chichen Itza in Mexico, archaeologists have found at least 12 ball courts. So you can tell they loved to play ball. So clearly they'd play soccer and stuff. All right. Now, as you can see at the more towards the left, there are homes, and the homes were made of mud and sticks with thatched roofs. So when we say thatched roof, we mean roofs made of straw. And they were built on raised platforms to protect them from floods. So these houses were usually built on higher grounds so they wouldn't flood, because clearly that was a problem in the Mayan civilization. Also, the center of the city was well planned, but most ordinary people lived outside the city. Okay, so more of the important stuff was in the center, whereas the houses would be more outside of the city. And the king, okay, so the king and his important advisors lived in this area. So they would live, so if you guys look at the picture, it's on the left, it's this huge building. The kings and the kings and his important advisors lived in this area, raised above the rest of the city, so they had a good view. The Maya built temples, palaces, and pyramids around large open squares and wide streets. The Maya also built roads to connect the cities, so it was easier to go from one place to another. Okay? So I hope that was clear. I mean, that picture is very important to that picture really helps you get an idea of how their cities were like. Okay? So now, in this chapter, there were a couple vocabulary words that I need you to know. So please do write them down. So you need to know what a city-state is. A city-state is the total area ruled by a king. Okay? A pyramid. A pyramid is a building with triangular sides used by the Maya as a tomb for dead kings and for public ceremonies. A tomb is a special chamber for burying the dead. So they don't usually. Okay, so the Mayans and I know that the Egyptians, they would use tombs, and they wouldn't bury the dead the way we bury the dead. We dig up a hole in the ground and we have our own little process for it, right? They would literally build them a tomb and just bury it was a special chamber for the dead, and usually it was made for the kings or very somebody very high in power and important. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This section was a bit shorter than the others, so please do review everything. I hope you understood what was mentioned, and if you do have any questions or concerns, please do let me know. Thank you.